Well, welcome. This video, we're going to review Chapter 9, and this is a really interesting video because we go over how law enforcement and officers have to work with the law court decisions. It's so interesting to me that to become a police officer, most departments out there, a huge percentage, only require a high school diploma or a GED. You have to be 21 years of age, you have to be able to get a driver's license, you have to be a US resident, but you don't have to have a lot of background in the law, and you do get trained in the academy and on the job. But when you think about it, as an officer, you'll be out there arresting people and taking away their freedoms, and that has to do with search and seizure, as you already learned about the Fourth Amendment, and you have Miranda, the Fifth Amendment, and you have the First Amendment. I mean, we have so many different laws out there, and if officers mess up and don't enforce the laws correctly, then if you do have a dangerous criminal that has committed a dangerous crime, a violent crime, that criminal could get off. So it's so amazing how much law officers have to know, and that a lot of people don't really understand that. But before we get into that, we're going to do something fun. We haven't done a review of some of the tools officers use. So we're going to talk about the ASP baton today. So when I first started policing, we carried what was called a PR-24 baton. It was about this long, longer than my screen. It wouldn't even show up on the screen, and it had a handle that you held. And when I went through the academy, we had to hold the handle, and it had to line up along our arm just perfectly whenever we ran or did what we call gigs, where we did push-ups or ran around the academy if we did something wrong. So it was really nice when they came out with this baton, because when you carried that old PR-24 baton, it didn't fit in your car when you drove. So you had to take it off, you had to set it down, and it was just really long, and it didn't work amazingly great as far as being easy to carry along with you. So they came out with the ASP. It's ASP baton, and they had different types. I actually had 3 of these because they started out, it was just kind of a stick that pulled out. Then they came out with a handle on it, and then they came out with this great little button, which is great because what you do is you're supposed to, I don't know if this is going to show on the video, but you're supposed to go up like that when it comes out, so it stays on your belt, up, and then you're supposed to take it out like that, and it does have a tip, and you used to have to hit it on the ground, and they taught you how to do that safely, how to lean down on the ground and look around and keep your officer safety, and then you had to hit it. They came out with this great little button that closed it, so it was a lot easier as far as that goes. But it fits, it's pretty heavy, but you have to learn on this. There's a whole day of defensive tactics, and you have to get recertified on it annually about how to use it for control holds and how to use it in major muscle groups and all that kind of stuff. So if you ever see an officer carrying this, and they do come in different lengths, this is called the ASP baton. So there's your introduction on that. All right, let's get started with Chapter 9. All right, so the parameters of police activity are governed by not only federal laws, but you have state laws and constitution, municipal or city ordinances, and court decisions. So an officer has to know all of these laws, and there's a lot of them. All right. Next, we have criminal law and we have civil law. So what's kind of a big misunderstanding is that officers are out there to enforce criminal law. So for example, if somebody speeds and is speeding in their vehicle, they don't or they don't stop for a stop sign, or they steal something, or they break into somebody's house, or they rob somebody, or murder, that's criminal. Civil law is a little different. So for example, a lot of times officers will respond to what we call landlord and tenant issues. And those are issues where you have a tenant generally that's saying, my landlord's locked me out, or they've done this or that. That is civil. And most of the time, officers can do what we call a civil standby, where they can keep the peace, but they're not enforcing any law. They will tell you that's something civil. You have to go to landlord and tenant court or civil court and deal with that on your own. All right, laws are confusing. They're not always perfectly clear language. There's contradictions, ambiguities. people can read them differently. So one person may read it and think one thing, and another person may read it and do something else. So officers have to really learn what laws can be utilized and what they're doing on a daily basis, and how those laws can be applied, and also what happens in the court. So when somebody's arrested or an officer makes an arrest under a certain law, what's going to happen? How does that judge apply that law? So there's a whole lot to it. All right, and you notice how I put laws in the United States. That's just my confusing, because they're so complex, and they're constantly changing. So I was always, especially in the Fourth Amendment search and seizure area, I was constantly reading appeal courts and new decisions from the Supreme Court of the United States. It's something that is continually and always, just as officers are always continuing with their firearm skills, and they have to qualify, and their defensive tactics and use of force and learning control holds and how to arrest and how to use that as baton. They're also doing a lot of training on the laws. And that's why it's right down here, I talk about discretionary powers. It's so important that officers have discretionary powers. Sometimes they don't on certain laws, but for a lot of the laws, they do. So for example, if you run a stop sign, the law doesn't say that an officer has to cite you. That officer has to take a whole bunch of things in consideration, and then they make the decision of how to handle that properly, whether or not a citation is going to be appropriate. In some states, it can be an arrest. In other states, it can be a warning. But like I said, on other laws, that doesn't happen. So for example, domestic battery. Now with the new laws that were instituted after in the mid-90s, if an officer comes upon a domestic situation where there's a relationship being husband and wife, someone that's married, roommates that are living together, do you have a college roommate? Or if there's a blood relative, or there's a relationship, a dating relationship going on, that's a domestic relationship. And then if that officer determines that there's a primary physical aggressor, meaning somebody was aggressive or both parties were aggressive and there's injuries, that officer cannot just say, oh, I want to warn you both. That officer is required to make an arrest. And it's serious. Domestic battery is also the law out there that if a candidate wants to be an officer and they've ever been convicted of domestic battery, they cannot be a law enforcement officer. And does anybody want to guess the reason? It is because they cannot carry a firearm. So you might see that on a quiz coming up or an exam. All right, so an officer is never alone in making legal decisions. An officer generally has the city attorney or will have the district attorney, depending on the crime, to assist them once an arrest has been made to move forward or to understand if any mistakes were made. All right, and that's where I just kind of talked about that officers work with all the different prosecutors, whether it's a state attorney, district attorney, or federal, with the attorney general. Cooperation is huge and paramount. For example, let's look at the Ashland city attorney. I haven't updated in this while, so I'm not sure if it's correct, but if you break certain criminal laws, then you are going to go, and it's in the city of Ashland, you're going to go to the Ashland Municipal Court. There's a judge. He holds court every Tuesday. Juvenile cases are heard in the morning at 8:30 a.m. And in Ashland, the municipal court, if you break any traffic violations, municipal code, city violations, and those are misdemeanors, you're going to see the Ashland Municipal Court. Jurisdiction is so huge because jurisdiction determines what court you're going to go to and where you're going to plead guilty, not guilty, and determine what's going to happen with whatever crime was committed. In Medford, so if you commit a crime in the city of Medford, they have their own municipal court, and they're a little different. They handle parking, traffic, again, city ordinance citations, and there's different times that can be handled as well. There's a city attorney, a deputy city attorneys, and those city attorneys, again, are the ones that are prosecuting the crimes in Medford. Also, Medford has where you can call to get status of municipal court cases, landlord-tenant disputes. There's felony and DUI offenses that will go to the Jackson County District Attorney. There's consumer complaints, there's the lawyer referral service, and public defender's office. So each city or municipality or county has their own court system. Medford's really interesting. When I looked it up, they have a lot of dismissible citations. Where I came from too in Vegas, we did the same thing. If you get, they're kind of called, we used to term them fix-a-tickets. So if you get pulled over for taillight violation, turn signal, crack windshield, any of these, you can actually generally, depending on the jurisdiction, go to the police department, show that you fixed your turn signal or your cracked windshield, and they can sign it off, and then it gets dismissed. So that's really awesome because the goal is to get you to fix these things. Also, there's traffic school. I always recommend, if I have students all the time come up and ask me and say, hey, I was caught speeding, what should I do? And I always first say, were you speeding? And if they take responsibility and they say, yes, they were, I say, ask for traffic school. The objective is to slow you down. We have over 2 million people killed every year from traffic accidents, and another 20 to 50 million people injured in traffic accidents. And the #1 cause is speeding. So I know everybody thinks officers are out there to harass them or bother them. And I always hear, oh, don't you have something more important to do? Well, we're saving a life. If we can slow somebody down or write a ticket and somebody can go to traffic school and learn how speeding causes all these crashes, we can hopefully save lives. So we are doing something important. All right, Jackson County got a lot of courts there. You've got the Supreme Court, you have a Court of Appeals, tax court, circuit courts, all these different courts. And generally that's what happens with your counties, and that's where your district attorney is housed. All right, I have a photo here of a citation. So if you've ever got a speeding ticket or you've ever been cited with a misdemeanor, this is what a citation. This is from Ashland Police Department. And if you want, you can pause here and kind of go over the highlighted portions, but just kind of goes over the citation number, offense, cost of ticket. Oregon is really unique. It was different for me when I moved here. I worked in the state of Nevada. So in Nevada, traffic offenses were misdemeanors. So for any traffic offense, such as speeding, running a red light, running a stop sign, that is a misdemeanor. So as an officer, I could warn the person that broke the traffic offense. I could issue a citation. And we called the citation in lieu of arrest, which meant, hey, you don't have any warrants. We think you'll show up to plead guilty or not guilty by the date we've given you to do that at the bottom, which is normally about, 5 to 6 weeks in the future. And so we're giving you a citation. And when you sign that citation, it just means that you're going to take care of this and plead guilty or not guilty. It doesn't mean you're guilty. Or we could actually arrest because it was a misdemeanor. In Oregon, they're called traffic offenses. So if you don't pay your citation, it doesn't actually go to warrant, it goes against your credit because it is not a misdemeanor. They call it an offense. So little tidbit there. And then I kind of have some zoomed in pictures of the citation so you can look at it a little bit better if you've never seen one. Here's another citation that's actually been when we used to have to handwrite them. Some officers still do that. A lot of departments may not have the printer that prints out the citation. I had to handwrite them. Our motor officers that drove on the motorcycles that worked traffic only did have the automated one, and a lot of departments do have those. It just depends on the budget. All right, I'm going to stop here. We're going to get into the First Amendment on the next video.